Hello, welcome to Bob's Dungeon. My name's Bob, I'll be your host. And in this video, we're going to talk about vampires. As, across tabletop role-playing games. And I've done a video before where I looked at some alternate games that were not Vampire the Masquerade for you to play your vampire games in. And you can look at that if you want. This, I'm just going to go over like a history of different vampires, and how they appear in different games and so forth, and kind of the evolution. But there were vampires in role-playing games long before Vampire the Masquerade came around in 1991. You could play vampires in regular Dungeons & Dragons. There were official rules out for it, and a couple of the Ravenloft books, and in a couple of other books that I can't think of offhand. But the thing is, with vampires and Dungeons & Dragons, the official stuff tend to be extremely punishing on the player's character. And so it really wasn't worth playing unless you're really super dedicated to wanting to play that vampire. Of course, you could homebrew it real easy, and with all homebrew stuff, it varies in how well it is, from absolutely being garbage to actually being pretty good. It just depends on what you come up with and what you're trying to do. And there were other games that did vampires. You could do vampires in the Palladium system. They had rules for it that you could use in their various games. And the rules for their vampires tend to go from being kind of junky because you're a mindless slave to the lead vampire, or if circumstances lined up right, you could be that lead vampire. So you kind of had this weird scale of how good of a vampire you were in the Palladium system. And I'm sure there are other games I'm failing to think of at the moment, but in 1991, the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade came out, and that kind of changed everything for as far as playing a vampire in a game goes. And the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade, we got it like right when it came out, and we were super into it. And in that first edition of Vampire the Masquerade, it was billed as a horror game, and it did have a lot of horror elements in it, and it was really cool. Then the second edition came out later on, and none of the rules changed. It was the exact same rules, even though it says a new edition. But they clarified a lot of the stuff, and it changed in tone a bit, and it kind of lost a lot of its horror edge. And I know there's probably going to be some people that will argue me that, but it did. It lost a lot of its horror edge when it moved on to a new edition. But the neat part about it was you can get the player's handbook for either of the editions, and it gave you bloodlines, so you got a lot more different vampires to play. Then came third edition. And third edition clarified it again. None of the rules changed. It clarified things even more, and it lost a lot more of its horror edge. By this point, when you played Vampire the Masquerade, you were either playing it as a social game with all of the politics going on in it, or you're playing it as a superhero game. And it really lost a lot of its horror edge. But in that third edition book, you had the clans again, but they added the merits and flaws to the core rule book, which they did not do in first or second edition. You had to get the player's guide in order to get the merits and flaws. They even added the bloodlines into the core rule book, which before, the only way you could get them is through the player's handbook. So that was pretty cool. But I never got the third edition book. I got the first edition and the second edition, and by then I wasn't interested in a new edition that didn't change anything. And by this point in Vampire, they were putting out a lot of stuff. And I mean a lot of stuff. So there was a lot of canon to the game. And I found it really hard to do anything without someone saying, well, you can't do that because in this book it says this. And I would tell them all the time, I don't have that book, so that's not something that's going on in this game. Oh no, you can't do that. And I just got over Vampire for the longest time. But then White Wolf ended the World of Darkness. Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf, Mage, the whole kit and caboodle. Boom, gone, dead. And they came out with a new World of Darkness, which these days is now called the Chronicles of Darkness. But in this, they came out with Vampire the Requiem. And meanwhile, the old World of Darkness, they were going to make it into a new video game. That was the plan. And that fell through, and it wound up shelved. They kind of put all their eggs in one basket, and it failed. But for whatever reason, Vampire the Requiem didn't catch on. I liked Requiem a lot better than Masquerade, because Requiem actually brought that horror feel back to me. It condensed the number of clans, but gave you like almost an infinite amount of bloodlines you could add to your game. And it just had a lot more stuff to it that brought back that horror edge. But nobody played it. I played it. I tried to play it. Tried to find people, but nobody would play it. So then they came out with a 20th anniversary for Vampire the Masquerade, which these days is now kind of looked at as 4th edition of Vampire the Masquerade. And technically it is, but it's still referred to as the 20th anniversary. So the 20th anniversary book, I didn't get it at first because it was super expensive. But later on, I did order it and got it print on demand for a pretty good price. And it's a good book. It has all the clans in it, a bunch of bloodlines in it, and almost all the information for Vampire the Masquerade that you can want for your game. They combine like several books into one. It's over 500 pages. It's a big book. It's a good book. But anyway, before that started getting played a lot, they came out with Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, or what people refer to these days as V5. And I actually liked a lot of the stuff they did with 5th edition for Vampire. They got rid of the blood points and replaced it with what's called the hunger rating, which is really neat. I've never had a chance to use it. Excuse me. Because like Vampire the Requiem, I cannot find anybody that wants to play 5th edition Vampire. I keep hearing people say, oh, it's the most popular edition yet, and everybody's playing it, but I can find nobody that wants to play it. So, anyway, it has all this new stuff in it. It has the hunger system, which is pretty cool. It changes the story up a lot and brings back some of the horror to the game. It also kills it by making it even more social than before. So it balances itself out, I guess. But in the 5th edition, the elders have left to go fight in the big war against the Sabbat. The Sabbat are pretty much a non-entity anymore, because they've all gone to fight the Great War and destroy the elders. So the excuse me. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. So anyway, the Anarchs decided they no longer want to be aligned with Camarilla, and they've broken off on their own. So they're the new kind of bad guys. sorta. And so you got a lot of Camarilla versus Anarch in the game, and the Spotter off doing other things. About the oldest vampire you're going to run into is maybe an 8th gen if you're lucky, and because most of them are gone, they've gone off to fight. So I've got some really neat ideas for the game, but couldn't find players. Another thing they've done is they've upped the ante with the Thin Bloods, and the 14th gen was supposed to be where the Thin Bloods began, and that was the big thing in the earlier editions, is fear of the 14th gen. But now you've got a 15th gen, and in some cases a 16th gen that are popping up. And for most vampires, the order stands: kill these guys on sight, because they don't want them around. But the Thin Bloods, even though they don't have direct access to disciplines, they've come up with their own way to compensate for that. And it's pretty neat. It's an alchemy type deal. And they can do things that really scare the heck out of a lot of the older vampires. So you got that going for you. But there's a lot of stuff I could do with that. Couldn't find players for it. But while all this was going on, there were other games that popped up that allowed you to play vampires. There is, of course, the Buffy the Vampire role-playing game, which it doesn't really have the rules in it to play a vampire. You're more of a vampire slayer. But the company that put it out is Eden Studios, and they have other books that do have rules in them that allow you to play vampires, which is really neat. It's got a different type of take and system on the way vampires work. And the Chronicles of Darkness, they all have gone on to a 2nd edition for all their core books. And the company that owns the license for that ended it, so we won't see anything beyond that. Which, you never know, though. I never thought we'd see anything beyond them coming out with the 20th anniversary edition for Masquerade, but then they came out with 5th edition. So who knows what the future holds for it. But the company that was printing it, Onyx Path, they came out with their own horror game called Curseborn, and I don't know a lot about that, but I'm guessing you could probably make up a vampire in it. Then you have other games out there that allow you to play vampires. There's a game called Blood Dark Thirst by Venger Satanis, and I've run that game several times. I really like it. I actually kind of like it a little more than Vampire the Masquerade, because it's a very simple game, and there's a lot you can do with it. It leaves a lot of open areas, so you can do virtually anything with it. I've even seen some guys play a sci-fi version of it. But aside from that, GURPS, the company that does GURPS, even got in on the Vampire the Masquerade craze back in the 90s, and they came out with Vampire the Masquerade for the GURPS system. And that one's weird. I never got a chance to play it. I have a friend that has several of the books for it, or had a friend that had several of the books for it. When he bought them, he thought he was buying regular Masquerade books. It's just when he started reading them, he realized they were for GURPS. And he was kind of mad, but it was kind of an interesting thing to have. But we never got the chance to play it. So I'm wondering what that's like. There was also a World of Darkness D20 game put out, and it supposedly would let you play vampires and werewolves and stuff in it, but not really. It's really weird the way the characters are, and I really wouldn't consider them vampires, but you can do what you want with it. But that's most of the ones I can think of offhand that allow you to play vampires. And a bit of a history of how it all advanced. I jumped around a bit there at the end because I forgot to mention a few in the beginning, but all in all, there's a lot of vampire games out there. A lot of history in the Vampire the Masquerade. It really hasn't changed a whole lot in all the years it's been out, in all these many decades. Not until you hit 5th edition. I mean, Requiem is pretty close to the way it runs, the older stuff runs. But they do some new stuff in it, which I really liked. But all in all, that's a rambling history of vampires in tabletop role-playing games. I'm not sure what a vampire looks like in today's Dungeons & Dragons. They probably just have it as an add-on, as another superpower for your character. Anyway, thank you for joining me at this rambling about different vampire games. And hopefully you'll join me next time where we'll talk about something else. Bye.